So we all know that society functions better when everyone has the opportunity to live the American dream. I understand that socialism isn't the answer, and any sane person will tell you that. But we currently live in a society where it's becoming increasingly harder for hardworking Americans to live the American dream. How do you plan on addressing this?
Well, let's get to the truth of the premise, right? That things are getting worse for Americans, and that in and of itself is a debate. So before we get to solutions, we have to agree on the actual facts, and so. And that could take hours, frankly. But let me hit a couple of things that are often talked about. So a lot of people who want more extreme policies will advocate for those policies by creating a false premise that everything's a disaster and that we're all on the verge of, catastrophe, right? Income inequality, poverty. They will say 1 in 5 people are in dire poverty. 1 in 5. That our poverty levels haven't changed over, since we started the war on poverty in the 60s. And I wonder if that's really consistent with your own experience in America. Do you really see that 1 in 5 people are in poverty? And it's an interesting question. So it depends on how you measure it. Because I'm sure that's not your actual experience, not 1 in 5. But what is our level of actual poverty? It's a good question to ask. So if you only measure it based on pre-tax income, then yeah, you get close to 1 in 5. The estimates range between 10 and 15%. But if you actually add in all of the other government programs, transfers, and post-tax income, well, then that changes dramatically. It gets down to under 3% of a poverty rate. There's another way to measure poverty too, which is simply asking people what they consume. And so in a consumption survey, when we ask what you actually take in, turns out that again, what we find is the poverty level is under 3%. So it's a good question. Are we starting off with the right premise when we try to solve this problem? Now, let's try to solve the problem now that we've kind of deflated the catastrophe-like thinking. The reality is that we need to allow people to pursue their own happiness. And so what's getting in somebody's way from actually achieving their next step on the economic ladder? Well, oftentimes it's things like occupational licensing. So how can we prevent that? In my district, there's a story of a lady, she does washing and drying of hair, but she wants to hire somebody to do that. It took her 1,000 hours of training, which doesn't make any sense. That's bad policy. We got to remove those regulations. Vocational training. One of the reasons people aren't increasing their productivity is because they don't have the right skill sets. So are we focusing too much on a 4-year degree, which is probably good for all of you guys, but it's not good for everybody? And they can get a good education in a much shorter amount of time and get a skill that pays $75,000 a year, say pipe fitting or welding or something like that. Why aren't we focusing more on that? Why don't we allow Pell Grants to be used for that kind of vocational training? So there are solutions that will actually help people climb that economic ladder, and I just named a couple of them.